This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'm going to call the April 1, 2021 meeting of the St. Peter Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is 5:31 p.m. on April 1. I need to amend the agenda, thanks to Mr. Rosso, who caught that. But if Ben shows up, we'll do his oath of office. So I'd like to add that after call to order. And I'd be doing it now, but if Ben shows up, we'll do it when he shows up. With that amendment, would anyone be inclined to move approval of the agenda?
Noel will move.
A motion by Noel,
This is Rosso. I will second, subject to the amendment.
second by Rosso. All in favor of the agenda with that noted corrections, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign, opposed? We have an agenda. You have the meeting minutes from February 4, 2021. I'll remind you, we did not assemble in March. Would anyone be inclined to move approval of the minutes or note any corrections or omissions?
I'd move to approve the minutes. This is Bickner.
Okay, do we have a second?
Davis will second.
And we have a second by Davis. All in favor of the minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We have no unfinished business. We do have one item for new business. That is consideration of a petition for a variance submitted by Danby Building LLC. This is vacant property on Gault Street, and upon its development, it will be assigned an address of 1675 Gault Street. The property was, Paul, I'm assuming you closed. I muted your mic so we didn't get the feedback, but if you could nod your head. Oh, there you go.
Yes, I closed on the property.
Okay, so Danby LLC owns the property as of yesterday. They have requested a variance from the side and rear yard setbacks. The property, let me grab my minutes or notes here. Property is 120 feet wide or 120 foot frontage on Clark Street, and then it's 225 foot deep. The western 30 feet of that property is essentially within the Clark Street right of way. To remedy that, Mr. Tanis has completed basically we're dedicating it as part of Clark Street right of way. So we'll address that matter. And then that property line will line up with the property line to the north. You'll notice the residential property south of the subject property also has that, they own the land to the center of the road. So those must have been at some point attempted to be put into an easement. But we'll be correcting that matter. In 2008, we did a comprehensive amendment to the zoning ordinance. I will say that the ordinance that existed at the time was deficient, and I can explain some of those that applied to industrial property. But in 2008, we changed the development regulations, which impacted the developability of this property. Prior to the adoption of the 2008, they required no side or rear yard setbacks unless the property was abutting a residentially zoned district. That's just not good business in any industrial park, given the nature of their operations. It also did not require any particular lot width or any minimum lot size. The 2008 ordinance then established 25-foot front, rear, and side yard setbacks. We established a minimum width of 150 feet. So as of that action, this property became a legal non-conforming property. This is one that I almost expected that perhaps we'd have a variance request when it was to be developed, because when we increased those setbacks to 25, that certainly impacted the developability of the property. Mr. Tanis intends to move a storage or / warehouse building onto the site. It has been inspected by Kevin Murphy, the building inspector, and I didn't hear Kevin note any deficiencies that would need to be corrected, but if there are, those would be corrected on site before a certificate of occupancy would be issued. To consider a variance, and I included that League of Minnesota Cities memo, and I think that's pretty comprehensive and clear. It's a three-part test. And the first test, is it a reasonable request for the use of land? And in this instance, given that the use is listed as a permitted use in the I-2 district, I think we can certainly meet that test. Let me step back then. I mentioned I-2. Prior to 2008, there was no such thing as I-2. There was just industrial zoning. So there was only one classification at that time. We then split that into what we considered the heavier industrial area, which would be the Geo Boy, Alumacraft, Public Works part, and then we had what we considered a light industrial, which would be the North Industrial Park, the hospital campus up in that area. And certainly the expectations were that perhaps there'd be somewhat two different standards. But at that time in 2008, this property was placed into that I-2 zoning district. So again, I believe we can meet the reasonableness. The next is there unique circumstances? And again, I would say there are unique circumstances that resulted from the action of the city when they increased the setbacks. And then the third is, will it damage the essential character of the neighborhood? And I would suggest that no, it would not. Almost all of the properties out there were developed prior to 2008 under the regulations of the previous ordinance. A number of them have setbacks that aren't anywhere near the 25 foot. So I wouldn't think granting the variance would have any negative impact on the essential character of the neighborhood. If you meet the 3-point test, it would likely be appropriate that a variance would be granted. And it has been my recommendation that yes, it does meet the 3-point test, and that my recommendation to you that you would further recommend the variances requested to the Board of Zoning Appeals, who are scheduled to meet on the 15th of this month, 2 weeks from today. So at this point, I will ask Mr. Tanis if he had any questions or anything to add.
I have no questions. It's just that with the setbacks as they are under the ordinance, it makes it such almost a non-buildable lot. It gets the setbacks in so close, you only have a very small place to construct anything on. So it takes away a lot of the usage. So I'd appreciate the variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I will note that Paul is working with Bolton and Mank to finish up the design of the stormwater. It's likely that a small stormwater pond will be erected in the southeast corner of the property, and that would be sized based upon the proposed development. If Mr. Tanis in the future would anticipate or like to move additional buildings onto that property or construct buildings on that property, the pond size may have to be adjusted then to accommodate for the additional impervious material. At this point, I'm going to just go around and see if you have questions, comments, concerns, either for myself or for Mr. Tanis. And I will start with Mr. Rosso.
Just a couple of things. First of all, it seems like a logical request to utilize that property, and as Mr. Tanis mentioned, that it certainly isn't as conducive to building at this point as it was prior to the change in the ordinance. The only question I have, and maybe I misunderstood you, Russ, the property, to the best of my knowledge, fronts Gault Street. Did I hear you say Gault or Clark?
Oh, I might have said Clark. Clark's been in my mind lately with the apartment building under construction, but thank you, Ken. Yes, it is Gault Street.
Paul's going to have to move his building to a different spot if we have it on Clark. So.
Thank you,
That's
Ken.
all I have.
Anything else? All right,
No,
Shannon?
I just had a question about process. Is there a process when a variance is requested that you have to do any notification to neighbors?
Yep, the Board of Zoning Appeal will be holding the public hearing on the 15th. And so we have mailed notice to everybody within 350 feet of the property. Notice is in the Herald, and notice is posted on the bulletin board outside City Administrator Prafty's office. So yeah, we will accomplish all the notices as required.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that was the only question I had.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Davis.
Again, I think this looks quite reasonable given the circumstances and the size of a lot. Is there any reason that we should be concerned about the setbacks with regard to fire safety, or is 15 feet adequate for that?
Yeah, I think 15, the buildings would be 30 feet apart. You know, if there are special, I don't know if there are special building codes if you are going to store flammable materials or explosive materials or anything like that. Sometimes, you know, if you build your garage too close to your house, you're going to have to put in that extra firewall. So I don't know if that applies to this industrial buildings, but I believe that should be sufficient. And again, the previous ordinance had a 10-foot, but again, I think that was a deficient ordinance. So
Okay, yeah, otherwise, I mean, that sounds quite adequate.
okay, thank you, Chairman Davis. Scott, any questions, comments?
No, I looked at the property and I think it fits in with the area, and because of its limitations, I think this is a good way to look at it.
Very good, thank you. I've been trying to be very stick to the statute when I do the variances, and I will note that next week's my 20th year anniversary, and this would be the second variance that I've recommended. So it is not an everyday occurrence, and it shouldn't be. There should be a threshold. But if you can meet that 3-point test and it's not for the convenience, or they're not saying it's for aesthetic reasons or something like that, then it is probably appropriate to grant the variance. There is a resolution that is prepared in the ordinance or in the packet. I don't have page numbers. I don't know if you guys do either, but it's the last 2 pages. That does recommend the Board of Zoning Appeals grant the variance as petitioned by Mr. Tanis. Would anyone be inclined to move the resolution?
This is Russ.
We have a motion by Rosso. Is there a second?
This is Fickner, I'll second it.
And we have a second by Fickner. It's appropriate that I go around one more time and ask if there's any further discussion. And this time I'll start with Shannon.
No further questions, thanks.
Andy?
No further.
Scott?
No further questions.
Ken?
No questions.
Okay, I will call the roll then. All in favor of the motion, say aye. And I'll start with Andy.
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Shannon?
Aye.
Congratulations, Mr. Tanis. Hoop number 1. And again, we'll assemble with the Board of Zoning Appeals on the 15th, 2 weeks from tonight at 5:30 in the public hearing. So thank you all.
Will that be by go to meeting?
Yep. As far as we know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm still in line trying to get my vaccine, so it won't be long, Paul. It won't be long, and I can't wait actually.
Thank
Okay,
you so much. Appreciate it.
thank you. Yeah, have a good night, Paul. Thank you. The annexation by ordinance was approved by the Minnesota Boundary Adjustments. It is expected that on the 12th, the City Council will initiate the condemnation of the sewer easements from the Enns family. We did come to an agreement with Ben Pell, and we settled with him at 140% of the appraised value. I would anticipate that it may be very likely that that would be the recommendation to the council. So the council will have a walkthrough of the process with City Attorney Brandt. He'll spell out next week at the workshop what's going to occur on the 12th. We are not talking about price. We will go into a closed session on the 12th to make that final decision with the council and what the final offer is going to be. We need to be judicious when we do that, because if we do not come to a negotiated settlement and it goes through the valuation court, if the final determination is that the value is 120% of the city's final offer, then the court could require that we pay her legal expenses, Mrs. Enns. They may. Now, our consultant says he's never seen that with the 20% threshold. However, if the final determination is 140% of what our final offer was, then we must pay their legal expenses, which can be obviously in the tens of thousands of dollars. So they do have their appraisal back, which staff is aware and will be discussing with the council. But there's a discrepancy between the values established by our appraisal and their appraisal, which isn't uncommon in a situation like this. So again, that should be initiated on the 12th unless we are able to come to successful negotiations by that time. That's all I had for your agenda, folks. Do you have questions for me? I don't see any. Would anyone be inclined to move adjournment?
Noel will make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Davis will second.
And a second by Davis. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.
All right, that's